Hey guys, back for part 2 of Scary Stories, and I was telling the basement. Last time we found ourselves in the basement of some guy, and they're stealing coins, and he saw a bunch of pictures on the wall of different torture methods. And here we go. I crept towards the nearest trophy case and aimed the light on my phone towards it. It was full of pictures, dozens of pictures of young men tied up. Some seemed more alive than others. They were missing limbs, tied down to tables, or hung up on the wall. I slowly turned towards Tyler and opened my mouth, but found myself unable to speak. I stared at him stupidly, my head pounding and stomach knotted. Footsteps on staircase freed me from my terrified trance. "Tyler, we need to get out of here right now," I croaked. He said, "What's the rush?" then called out towards the staircase. "Ahmed, Chris, took you clowns long enough. Hit gold down here, boys. Let's spark up a spliff to celebrate." The overhead light snapped on, and Tyler and I were momentarily blinded. I started to curse when I heard quiet sobs. I opened my eyes and saw a large, overweight man standing behind Ahmed and Chris. Chris's face was covered in blood, and I saw that he no longer had eyes. Dark, empty sockets looked out upon the room. Tyler straightened up and screamed, "Who the fuck are you? Step back or I will fuck you up." The fat man pushed Ahmed towards us, put his hand around Chris's shoulder, and said, "Chris, why don't you tell your young friend here what happens to boys who disrespect me?" Chris opened his mouth and made a strange gargling sound. Blood dripped out of his mouth. Ahmed, tears running down his face, whispered to us. He cut out Chris's tongue and eyes. The fat man, eyes glinting, laughed deeply and said, "Ahmed is correct, but I think we can all agree Chris is much better behaved now." He patted Chris on the head, tousled his hair, and said, "Now which one of you can explain what nice men like yourself are doing in my home at this time of night?" Tyler took a step towards the man, raising his fist, and said, "You have no idea who you're messing with." The fat man chuckled, causing his jowls to jiggle, and raised a pistol. Tyler paused for a moment, contemplating the gun in the man's hand. "No way, you can't touch me. My father is a powerful man," said Tyler. The fat man laughed again, put the gun to the back of Chris's head, and pulled the trigger. Brains and bits of skull showered Tyler. "You boys can call me Mr. G, and you're going to do exactly what I say," said the man. He nodded towards me and said, "You take the painting down behind you and twist the knob." I did as he instructed, and a secret door in the wall opened, revealing a large circular room behind it. "Move along now," said the man cheerfully. The three of us slowly moved into the room with the fat man not far behind. In the center stood a stainless steel surgical table. The purity of the room was filled with a variety of torture devices that looked straight out of the Dark Ages. I recognized a torture rack, Judas cradle, an Iron Maiden, and a large vat sitting over a propane burner. On a wooden table there appeared to be a wide variety of knives, hammers, scalpels, and saws. Mr. G put his left hand into his pocket and pulled out a black plastic comb. He combed back his dark, greasy hair while still pointing the gun at Tyler. "Where do we go from here?" he mused aloud as he placed the comb back into his pocket. He continued, "Tyler, only one of you will be allowed to leave my house tonight. Who should it be?" A dark spot began to grow on Tyler's crotch. The smell of urine filled the large room. Tyler pointed a trembling hand towards Ahmed and me and said with a quavering voice, "This was all their idea. They dragged me into this whole thing, I swear." Mr. G's brow furrowed, as if he were seriously considering Tyler's words. He smiled at Tyler and said, "I believe you, Tyler, but the only way you can leave is if you help me tie up your friends. There is some rope over on the wooden table." A look of relief came upon Tyler's face, and he smiled at Ahmed and me. He shouted out, "Whatever you say, Mr. G," as he quickly scampered over to the table to retrieve the rope. God, this guy was quick to fucking throw his friends under the bus, wasn't he? God, that's horrible. What the fuck? "Good, now bring it back to me, boy," said Mr. G. He turned to Ahmed and me and winked. Tyler approached Mr. G, rope in hand, and said, "You know, Mr. G, I told these guys not to mess with a man such as yourself, but they just wouldn't listen." Yes, I'm sure you did," said Mr. G as he pulled out a small taser and knocked Tyler unconscious. Mr. G grunted, "You boys stay right where you are," as he bent over to tie up Tyler's hands and feet. He then dragged Tyler's limp body over towards the large vat and hoisted Tyler into it. He tied Tyler's hand to a hook hanging over the vat, so that Tyler's head would not slip under water. He leaned down to light the hanging over the vat so that Tyler's head... What the fuck? Let's get this soup cooking, more to himself than Ahmed and me. Mr. G came back to Ahmed and I and said, "Who's next?" Ahmed and I looked at one another but said nothing. Tyler had awoken on the other side of the room and began begging for Mr. G to let him go. "Please, please, I'll do anything, anything. Oh God, it's getting hot, it's burning." Mr. G ignored the pleas and hummed to himself while staring at Ahmed and me. Tyler's pleas became shriller until they turned to gibberish and eventually one unconscious scream, which lasted for minutes. The screams eventually stopped and the smell of cooked flesh filled the room. Mr. G returned to the vat and turned off the propane burner. Without warning, Ahmed sprang to his feet and sprinted towards the door. Mr. G cursed and fumbled for his gun, aimed, and fired off a shot, which hit Ahmed in his calf. Ahmed crumpled into a ball on the floor. He only made it halfway to the door. Ha! That fucking rhymed. Mr. G walked over to Ahmed, grabbed both of his arms, and dragged him towards the steel table in the center of the room. He looked at me and said, "Lucky man, I am going to put on a show for you." They were 10 feet away from the table when I made my move. I used every last bit of energy I could muster, and I sprinted towards the monster in the middle of the room. He had dropped Ahmed's arms and pulled out his gun. I could feel the bullets whizzing over my head, but the adrenaline surging through my body drowned out any and all sounds. My shoulders connected with the fat man's abdomen, and I pumped my legs, driving him backwards like we were taught during football. We gained momentum as his obese body began to topple backwards. I dug deep to pull up whatever strength I had left. His body slammed into the open Iron Maiden. I released him and immediately grabbed the door and struggled to push it shut. I heard a gasp from within the contraption as the spikes bit into his flesh, but he did not scream. Instead, he began to laugh, louder and harder, until the doors were finally shut and the spikes fully impaled his body, and then there was only silence. I turned and retrieved Ahmed, supporting his weight against my shoulder. Ahmed and I slowly made our way out of the basement and called the police. The police found a dozen more bodies in the freezer behind the torture room. I was a nervous wreck for years after this incident. Only with intensive therapy have I been able to obtain something resembling a normal life. The deaths of my friends were awful, of course, but the sound of Mr. G laughing during his final moments of life are what haunts me to this day. When I close my eyes to sleep at night, all I see are his eyes twinkling and jowls jiggling as he laughs at the terrible death closing in upon him. The original author is Jane and Jeff, the killer couple. And that will be it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Bye.